county town 50 years ago or more, and when the county town lost its attraction for the Asleys, the Dunstans, the Waverhams, how could it be supposed that the Domvales, the Bextons and the Wilds would continue to go and winter there in their second-rate houses and with their increased expenditure? So the grand old houses stood empty a while, and then speculators ventured to purchase and to turn the deserted mansions into many smaller dwellings fitted for the professional man, and even, bend your ear lower, lest the shade of Marmaduke, first Baron Waverham, hear, into shops. Even that was not so very bad compared with the innovation on the old glories. The shopkeepers found out that the once fashionable street was dark, and that the dingy light did not show off their goods to advantage. The surgeon could not see to draw his patient's teeth. The lawyer had to ring for candles an hour earlier than he was accustomed to do when living in a more plebeian street. In short, by mutual consent, the whole front of one side of the street was pulled down and rebuilt in the flat, mean, unrelieved style of George III. The body of the houses was too solidly grand to submit to alteration, so people were occasionally surprised, after passing through a commonplace-looking shop, to find themselves at the front of a grand carved oaken place, lighted by a window of stained glass, storied all over with armorial bearings. Up such a stair, past such a window, through which the moonlight fell on her with a glory of many colours, Ruth passed wearily one January night, now many years ago. I call